Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I, perhaps more than most here today, welcome the second reading of the Pedicabs London Bill. It does seem to be a groundhog day for me, as this will be the third time since entering Parliament in 2019 that I've stood in this chamber and spoken in a second reading highlighting the need for a licensing scheme for pedicabs in London. Madam Deputy Speaker, you and others in and outside Parliament could be forgiven for wondering why on earth the government has given time for this small, tiny bill. One would expect that it should be made able to get through law via a private member's bill, as the Minister has already mentioned. And yes, it should have been. In fact, there were 4 attempts to introduce a pedicabs licensing scheme in London via private members' bills. First, as we heard from the Honourable Member for Sutton, and then by my predecessor Mark Field, and finally myself. Since entering Parliament, I've attempted to secure a PMB twice on pedicab licensing, but due to the way PMBs can fail due to a single objection to a bill, mine have failed. Therefore, I'm truly grateful to the government for, firstly, under the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was 100% behind the wish to secure pedicab legislation. He agreed with the then Transport Secretary, the Right Honourable Member for Welwyn Hatfield, to put a clause in the planned transport bill, which fell when Mr Johnson resigned. I then started my lobbying from scratch and met with number 10 officials from the Sunak administration to make the case for pedicab legislation to be given government time. And I would like to put on record my thanks to help from people from across Parliament, particularly Baroness Stowell of Beeston, who has really supported my lobbying campaign with ministers and their special advisers. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would also like to put on record my thanks and my admiration for the 2 special advisers, James Nation and Will Tanner, who accepted that we needed to introduce pedicab regulation. And without them, I don't think we would be here today, and I would like to thank them and the Minister and the Secretary of State for Transport for really understanding the reasons why we need this legislation. I did not know for certain whether we would get government time, and therefore, when I stood in the other place and heard His Majesty announced a bill would be introduced to deal with the scourge of unlicensed pedicabs in London, you could have knocked me over with a feather. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is a fair question to ask, why do we need this legislation at all? And I wish to first of all point out that this bill does not and will not propose to ban pedicabs from the streets of London. It is about improving the conditions for drivers and for passengers. In fact, I firmly believe that if we can have properly regulated pedicabs, they can offer a very positive and special visitor experience. It is important to note that, and as I said, it is my understanding that pedicab regulation already exists in this country, and where it has been tabled and exists in places like Oxford, York and Salisbury, we still see pedicabs, but they are a much better offer now. So I think it's very clear that regulating of pedicabs does not mean the eradication of pedicabs.
But of
course.
She will have seen, as I have, the briefing from the Cycling UK. And does she recall that that briefing says that even where local authorities have been keen to support local would-be pedicab operations, as has happened in Oxford, Salisbury and York, they have been unable to operate on a ply-for-hire basis because the local taxi operators who view them as competition start asking questions about whether the pedicabs and their operators have the same insurance, etc. So they haven't been able to operate in those areas outside London because of the opposition from the licensed taxi drivers.
I thank my honourable friend for that point. As far as I'm concerned, Cycling UK has supported this Pedicabs London bill, and I've had several meetings with them. I think he may have been involved in some of those meetings previously, and they have always understood why I want to bring in this bill. But Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it's very important to make the point that drivers and vehicles must be safe. And there have been too many instances when there have been police operations and operations in conjunction with Westminster City Council that we have found drivers who are unfit to be taking passengers, whether they are wanted for serious crimes, whether it's sexual violence crimes. I believe one person was actually found wanted for murder. There's, of course.
For giving way. Does she agree that part of this regulation is not just about ensuring that there's a fair and transparent fare model, but actually TfL will have the option to ensure that those drivers undergo criminal checks and that they have the right to work in the UK?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her intervention. That is the crux of why I want to do this more than anything else, is to make these vehicles safe in the fact that they are passing MOTs and they are fit to be on the street, but also the drivers. And again, from the operations that the police and Westminster City Council has undertaken over years, we have found asylum seekers who haven't got the right to work driving these pedicabs. We have found illegal immigrants who haven't got the right to work here. And these people are also being exploited. Let's not forget that. One of the reasons why I think it's important to have regulated pedicabs is that it will ensure that drivers have rights. We also have to make sure that we have a regulated fare system in place, and operators must adhere to the highway code and not play blaring music at all hours of day and night. It is time, Madam Deputy Speaker, that pedicabs in London were regulated as black cabs are, as Ubers are, and as private hire vehicles are. I hear what the member for Christchurch said about the London Taxi Drivers Association, what they said 20 years ago. From my own meetings in the last couple of years, they have been very clear that they want a level playing field. They don't expect these pedicabs to be banned. They just want them to be as safe as pedicabs, as black cabs. Why should a black cab driver have to jump through so many hoops to be able to get on the road? And a pedicab driver can literally get on a pedicab, go onto the streets of Westminster and ply for trade. It cannot be right, and we have to make sure that the whole system is fair and just and legal. Madam Deputy Speaker, parts of my constituency, including Soho, Covent Garden, Marylebone and Fitzrovia, can become like the Wild West. It becomes the Wild West End at times because of the sheer numbers of pedicabs on the street. Too many play extraordinarily loud music, often block roads and pavements, disrupt residents and businesses, and have a poor track record for exploiting London tourists. I am extremely grateful for the wide range of support I have had for securing pedicab regulation from local people across the two cities and residents' associations such as the Soho Society, Marylebone Association and Covent Garden Residents Association, as well as businesses including the Hippodrome, Heart of London Business Association and the West End Company. I would also like to thank Roger Geffin from Cycling UK, Chris Dixon from Pedal Me, and Friedel Schroeder from the London Pedicabs Operators Association as well, who has been on this journey with me and have always provided me with the information and support for what I am intending to do. The reason why pedicabs are not regulated in London, as we've heard, can be traced back to the fact that under the Metropolitan Public Carriage Act 1869, pedicabs in Greater London are defined as a stage carriage, and modern legislation has not corrected the issues, and thus they do not fall under Transport for London's licensing powers. As a result, pedicabs are currently the only form of public transport that is not regulated in London. This bill corrects that. The bill clearly outlines that to attain a licence to operate a pedicab, operators must adhere to several requirements pertaining to their pedicabs. These requirements relate to the roadworthiness and cleanliness of pedicabs, safety and insurance requirements, the type of equipment that must be carried on board, the appearance and marking of pedicabs, and the conduct of pedicab operators. Madam Deputy Speaker, I must thank the noble members of the other place where this bill began its parliamentary journey, who have improved the bill and ensured it is as watertight as possible. I would like to put on record my grateful thanks to Transport Minister Lord Davis of Gower for his excellent stewardship of the bill through the other place, and for joining me on a visit to Leicester Square on a Sunday evening to see the situation for himself, as did the Honourable Member for Hexham. And I'm sure it was an enjoyable and different ministerial visit to, they're both used to. But we did see at that time in Leicester Square 4 pedicabs blocking a pavement which would prevent emergency vehicles from being able to enter Leicester Square if there'd been an incident, whether it be an ambulance, a fire engine or police vehicles. These have got to be properly regulated to make sure that the public are safe. The other place has tightened up the definition of a pedicab to prevent any adjustments being made to a pedicab to get around licensing requirements. And this bill will ensure that not only is the conduct of operating a pedicab regulated, but that it provides Transport for London, who will operate the licensing scheme, with the powers to implement a proper fare system, which, like the ones we see for black cabs and Ubers. Rip-off fares from pedicabs are a constant theme in my inbox and in media coverage. Of course.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and making such a powerful speech on why we need regulation on this. Is she aware of the BBC Democracy report where they did some undercover work in looking at the fee charges? One pedicab was charging a flat fee of £5 per minute. Another one reportedly charges close to £500 for a 10-minute ride. Does she not think that this is an extortionate rip-off?
I absolutely agree and thank the Honourable Lady for her points. And I think that was a very, very fascinating report by BBC Democracy and showed that some pedicab drivers, and must make the very, very important point that not all pedicab drivers are rogues, and there are brilliant organisations and companies like Pedal Me, and I've worked with Chris Dixon, the founder. This is an outstanding pedicabs company. They properly look after their drivers, they look after their vehicles, and I want all pedicabs to be like that. And the BBC Democracy report did show that some pedicab drivers are being used for drug dealing and for taking people to brothels where who just knows what's going to happen if they go to some very, very dodgy club. That is why we've got to regulate these and make sure that the drivers are fit to take passengers and to ensure that they are legally able to work in this country more than anything else. But rip-off fares from pedicabs are constantly in the media, especially as pedicab operators look to take advantage of vulnerable tourists enjoying the incredible culture offer of the West End. One constituent who came across one of these incidents with a tourist wrote to me saying the pedicab operator got very aggressive when the Americans refused to pay £300 for a journey from Trafalgar Square to Great Smith Street. That is a journey of 0.8 miles. Madam Deputy Speaker, I do welcome that this bill provides Transport for London with powers to set what fares can be charged, when and how passengers must be made aware of the fares, and what methods of payments are acceptable. Perhaps the most popular part of the bill for my constituents are the provisions on riders' conduct, which, thanks to the other place, has been strengthened to include noise limits. The frustration local people often face due to the loudspeakers many pedicabs carry was best summed up by a constituent who said to me, "I have no choice but to listen to music hour after hour, day after day, and often until the early hours of the morning." They are left in situ, able to do as they know, because they know that the council and the police have no powers to stop them. Therefore, I am pleased to see the other place strengthen the bill's ability to tackle unreasonable noise levels by adding noise restrictions to the conduct requirements operators must meet in order to keep their licences. Of course.
On the noise issue, you will know that St Thomas's Hospital, my constituency, where a number of these pedicabs congregate outside and you've got patients recovering from life-saving treatment, having that noise being blurted out in the early hours of the morning, does she agree with me that that's totally unreasonable?
It is completely unreasonable, and the Honourable Lady makes an absolute point. And it's hospitals, it's also hotels, and a losing business. If you have a hotel in the West End where you've got a pedicab outside not moving for hours at 2 o'clock in the morning, rightly, patrons can complain and ask their money back. So, you know, it's not just about residents and hospital patients, it's also about businesses losing money. I am therefore pleased that obviously that noise levels will be added to restrictions. And as my constituent rightly pointed out, pedicabs can get away with acting like this because there was no powers, or there are no powers, to contain them. But the Pedicabs London Bill will bring this, hopefully, to an end. For those operators who do not adhere to their licence terms, they will be given a fixed penalty notice. And if the conduct of operators does not improve after this, Transport of London will reserve the right to demobilise, seize and dispose of pedicabs that contravene the regulations. This will make a huge difference. Madam Deputy Speaker, I finally would like to touch on Transport for London's role here and would like to put on record my sincere thanks to Will Norman, the Mayor of London's Walking and Cycling Commissioner. He has worked closely with me on my private members' bills and has been a huge advocate for pedicab regulation. I note that the other place, in the other place, an amendment was laid to allow for the Department of Transport to provide Transport for London with statutory guidance on pedicab regulation in the future. I agree with the other place, and I welcome the fact the government has accepted this amendment and that the correct body to oversee this will be TfL, as they currently regulate licensing for all other taxi and private hires. Madam Deputy Speaker, it may have taken 4 PMBs, an abandoned transport bill, and years of lobbying and campaigning from politicians from across the political divide, but I'm confident that finally we will see the Pedicabs London Bill become law and the streets of London will be safer and we will have a safe and thriving pedicabs industry. Thank you.